Welcome to Torchbearers by College Esports News. My name is Kenneth and on this show, we talk with those carrying the flame of college esports at programs across the continent to learn from their expertise in a particular segment of our vast ecosystem. On much of this show, we spend more time focusing on how we as educators can better prepare college students for what's to come in the real world. However, the other side of the pipeline is equally as important. After all, high schoolers are the next generation of college students. In this episode, I sit down with Chris Aviles, current president of Garden State Esports, to learn about what his organization is cultivating with the state leagues of New Jersey. In year 7 of the high school state league, Garden State Esports is supporting organized esports play for over 350 schools, which is coming along with newly interested stakeholders and possibilities for cross-pollination between both ecosystems. As we continue to build out what the traditional esports experience looks like, this conversation to me feels like a glimpse into the future of where we may be heading as an industry. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Chris. Well, Chris, welcome to Torchbearers.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, first question I'd like to start off with, what is top of your mind? We're recording this in the morning, so maybe what's the first thing you've got to do that is Garden State Esports focused?
First thing that I have to do. So here's the thing is like my wife and a lot of folks on my team make fun of me is the bigger and more successful Garden State Esports becomes, the less time I get to do cool stuff. So since having left teaching about a year ago, I don't really get to coach anymore. And as we start to have bigger events and interest from outside forces who want to be a part of it, a lot of times it's meetings. Today I have to do a bunch of QuickBooks stuff. I'm also a state reseller here in New Jersey, so I'm able to get schools the equipment they need, digital games, online codes, and stuff like that. So for the 400 and something schools that we have, there's usually a general flow of I need, right now it seems like a lot of the family plans for Nintendo Switches are running out. So I'm having a lot of emergency emails. We have a match on Wednesday. Our family plan just ran out. Can you, get us a new one? But then you also have to square that with the wonderful, quick-moving world of public education where they have to get an estimate, and then I have to get a PO, and then it has to go to the board meeting. So I give out a lot of good faith Nintendo family plan codes, to make sure, that schools have what they need to be successful. So a lot of it is just like administrative stuff, paperwork, meetings on projects and initiatives that we have, and stuff like that.
Sounds like a really fun day ahead.
Literally the worst, right? My team makes fun of me is I get to do all the boring stuff now.
Yep.
But at least everybody on my team gets to do the cool stuff, which is,
right.
That's nice. They
Pros
get to
and
have
cons.
fun. Right.
Right.
I tell them I'll do all the boring stuff so you guys can do the cool stuff.
You touched on it a little bit there, but what is your story in terms of how you got here? First, how did you get into video games in the first place? And then how'd you get into the esports world?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, right? I've always really been into games, and it goes back to when my dad left the Army, he started to work for AT&T. And, I would never see him. He'd be out driving trucks and stuff like that. And when he would come home off the road, he would actually just come and grab me out of school. And one of the things that we did together was play Legend of Zelda. And if you remember the original NES Legend of Zelda, it came with a map that was like 90% blank. And we would play the game, and he would, write on the map what we were doing, and I would play, and that was a big part of like our bonding. And then AT&T at some point asked him if he would like to stop driving trucks and start to learn how to build computers. And so my dad went to college at night, and his homework was like building and fixing computers, and so we would do that a lot together. So I built my first PC when I was like 5 or 6, and I started to play video games on the PC, DOS, and I remember Alley Cat Alley was like the first game that I played, and then I remember playing like Maniac Mansion and, all these like super early, late 80s, early 90s video games, and, they had a big impact on me. And so time went by, and mostly I was into RPGs, but obviously every kid my age that's into gaming and esports, obviously I got hooked into StarCraft. And so it's funny, I was big into wrestling, right? Wrestling's my favorite sport. And I would kind of wrestle year round, but when we weren't wrestling, like the wrestlers, we were all carrying our computers to somebody's house to land the computers together to play StarCraft after practice or something like that. So I remember my first tournament, I think, was at like a Radio Shack or something like that. And I got my doors blown off, but it was just fun, right? I enjoy competition. So, you fast forward a little bit. And I remember when I first started teaching, I was a high school English teacher, and StarCraft 2 was out. My buddy said, hey, there's MLG is down in Atlantic City. Do you want to go watch a StarCraft tournament? I had no idea that was even a thing, right? So it was 2011, went down to Atlantic City, watched the MLG match, and it wasn't like the StarCraft part that I was so impressed with. It was all like the pomp and circumstance around it, right? So they had like entrance music, they had the casters, they had, confetti flying when somebody won. And I remember sitting there, because at the time as a high school, I was coaching football, wrestling, and track. But you always have kids who have no interest in traditional sports. And these kids, even back then would probably define themselves as gamers, and that's what they were into. And as a teacher, a lot of my relationship building with students was around what games we were playing. And I would always allow them to bring in their consoles and hook them up to my TV in the classroom so they, could play games instead of going to the cafeteria, and they loved that. But I remember watching, this MLG tournament in Atlantic City and thinking to myself, like, there are so many kids that I teach that would love to be a part of something like this and to feel special and to have a spotlight on them. So I remember I went back and the next day I started to talk to, my administrators, my board of education, and it was a no for 7 years. And for whatever reason, we didn't have the devices. A lot of it was, will violent kids make violent video games? And a lot of this was, do we want kids having more screen time and stuff like that? And so every time they would say no, I would go back and write a chapter on this curriculum of using games to, lead to better learning outcomes from kids. So you fast forward and COVID hits and everything else, and these kids in their lives are canceled. So I asked my administrator, I said, can I send these kids home with laptops? We're going to play Rocket League against my buddy Steve Isaacs. And Steve Isaacs, if you don't know now, he's the head of secondary education for Epic Games. Amazing human being, but at the time he was just a teacher in Basking Ridge and has been a buddy of mine for a long, long time. And like me, he kind of had like a little video game club inside of his classroom, and we challenged each other. We played Rocket League, and so we were in a Zoom as coaches, and we had 3v3 Rocket League matches, and he invited some friends, and I invited some other teacher friends who had similar setup, video games, and could get the kids computers if they didn't have them. And we came out of COVID with 80 schools playing. And, one of the big things we talked about, because again, at teachers, at the end of the day, like our bottom line is to kids, right? And so we always said, when COVID is over, we want to bring these kids together face to face so they can see who they've been playing with for the last couple of years, right? And kind of reacclimate them to in-person humanity. Because, the big joke about, teaching back then was these kids were feral. They forgot how to act because they were at home for so long. But, and so to do that, I knew, it would take a couple dollars to get that going. So we actually created Garden State Esports, and we turned it into a nonprofit. And we got all our paperwork in because we were bored during COVID anyway. And we came out of COVID, once we got the all clear, I think we had maybe 110 schools or so. And since then, we've basically doubled in size every year. So we came out of COVID, and then as of today, we have 410 or 411 as of like yesterday. Comes down to about 12,000 kids and stuff like that. And so that's kind of how it started, was at the end of the day, just trying to meet the needs of kids and give them something to do. And I think because it grew so quickly and we were hearing from kids, and even their parents were emailing us, and other teachers were talking about, this really means so much to these kids and they're having such a great time. We hope this doesn't end. And we were really interested too, is we kept hearing how the kids that were involved were kids that have never been involved in anything. And so now, 7 years after we started Garden State Esports, and we poll our kids and our teachers and programs all the time, And that stat still holds, right? About half of these kids have never done anything at their school but esports. Right. They were just going home on the bus and they weren't engaged. And as a teacher, right, esports can be used for better grades and behavior and attendance. And, it's a lot easier to make the argument now that any extracurricular activity, whether it's football, whether it's the play, whether it's band, whether it's esports, anytime a kid has something to look forward to after school, and our kids also say that their coach is a trusted adult they can go to when they're in trouble and stuff like that. Anytime you put a role model and give something for kids to look forward to after school, it's going to lead to better learning outcomes. And so that's kind of how it all got started, and that's always been the main purpose, is just to meet the needs of kids in schools and have them use esports to make better people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the students who are otherwise would not be engaged is something that we all know, but it's another thing to experience it, right?
Absolutely.
Watch the students who otherwise wouldn't have anything, would go home, and in my case, right, sit in their dorm rooms. In your case, go home on the school bus and sit there with their parents and maybe go home and watch some YouTube videos on something that had to do with gaming, or play on their own devices without the context or ability to meet anyone else. Interesting, actually, to hear your addendum on this, too. I would not have thought that there was a lot of overlap between wrestling and esports folks. But yet I have a player who was on his wrestling team and now is joining the esports program and wants to do that. Is there just something we don't know about wrestling?
So, I mean, I would argue, and obviously I have zero evidence to back any of this up, but if a kid wrestles, they're generally hyper competitive. And they will see competition anywhere, right? It takes a special kind of kid to wrestle. It's the hardest sport on the planet. And wrestlers are just built differently and generally have a screw loose. And, we'll find competition anywhere. So, I mean, there were times even back when I was in high school and the IT guy at the high school was into StarCraft too. We would bring our computers into the school. We would have practice in the morning on a Saturday. And then we would walk to a classroom and we would land the computers and they would let us play in the school. So it's, but you think about how silly it sounds, but here I am, an old man, and I still remember, I don't remember the practice. The practices were horrible, but I definitely remember playing StarCraft with my friends after, and lugging these computers around. So, it goes back to, too, if half these kids have never done anything at their school, there's still 50% of these kids that have. And that is a great way to cross-pollinate kids, right? So that wrestler is going to be interacting with a bunch of kids that he maybe will never have met before. Or I just did an interview. We're doing a spotlight on Freehold Borough, a high school here in New Jersey. And one of the angles that we explored for their highlight video is the starting center for their football team did nothing in the winter. He loves Overwatch. They just won a state championship. And he, in high school, and it's not a huge high school, maybe 1,000 kids, he said he had never met those kids until this year because all 4 of them come from the Computer Science Academy inside of the high school. And they were just 2 ships in the night, and they never saw each other. But their shared love of Overwatch brought them together, and they got to win a state championship. And he was joking. Awesome. He's like, listen, we haven't even won a conference championship in football, but to, win a state championship and bring home, we have a huge belt that we give out. To bring home a belt, is something that he said, I'll always remember that. And these kids will be my friends for life. They play Overwatch together outside of school now. So, it's one of those things when I think about what are we trying to accomplish here in esports, and when I think about people, I'm always a big guy. I go to these conferences and I listen to these people on these panels, and everybody just says the same things on repeat. Well, we need to build the foundation. That's what the foundation is. The foundation is getting kids out of their dorm or getting them out of, their houses, getting them in a shared space around something that they love, making sure it's run the right way, right, where people understand how you treat people matters and stuff like that. Let's get them leaving wanting to come back. Because even from college, I was an RA in college. And I remember the number one rule we had is do not let these kids go home on the weekend. Come up with something to make them stay. Because if they go home, especially as freshmen, by Thanksgiving, they're not coming back. So, I don't know about you, I'm going to guess you're younger than I am, but I'm talking about like even
A little bit.
yeah. I mean, I graduated college in '06. We were organizing Counter-Strike tournaments on my floor, right? We were
Yeah.
organizing Madden tournaments. So this isn't rocket science, right? This stuff has been happening forever. We just got to figure out how to meaningfully scale it, and if an esports program should appeal to the masses, right? How do you slowly work your way up into something hyper competitive, right? What do you do with that 1% of the 50% who are playing for you?
Yeah.
How do you make their experience meaningful and something they could do to, up their own stakes and bring renown to their college and high school and stuff like that?
It's not rocket science, but it might be Rocket League.
Yeah, which is fine, man. Rocket League is a second most popular. I would say it's probably Smash at this point, man. Smash is just on a
Really?
different. Oh, Smash is
Yeah.
on a different plane of existence. It's wild. These kids
Yeah.
obsessed
Well,
with Smash.
I want to get into that a little bit. You
Sure.
talked about the growth that Garden State Esports has experienced. What is the status currently of high school esports in New Jersey? Because every state is going to look a little different the way high school mostly operates, right? So what does it look like in New Jersey right now?
I mean, New Jersey, it is fantastic. It really is. It's unbelievable. So, over the last 18 months, I have made it my mission to basically get a consensus that esports is a meaningful part of kids' after school activities. Esports should be considered a varsity sport or activity, leave it up to the schools, and that Garden State Esports is the official governing body of esports in New Jersey. Because we are in a situation where our state athletic association wants nothing to do with esports, but they also want to just come out and say that. So, maybe more so 4 years ago, I had schools that would either say, oh, we're not going to participate because you're not under the NJSIAA, or more alarming, we're not going to give out varsity letters because you're not under the NJSIAA. So, we had to do a lot of homework and help in a bunch of different areas because there's a law here they passed in 2017 that says any interscholastic competition deemed worthy by the Board of Ed can receive a varsity letter. So we have two other activities here in New Jersey that are not under NJSIAA that give varsity letters. That I guess you could make the argument that they're considered sports. I consider them a sport. We have marching band and we have cheerleading. And so marching band and cheerleading are kind of run by teacher-run nonprofits. So we saw a large parallel between what we were doing and what marching band and cheerleading were doing. And we were very happy to be the third because I don't need the athletic association to tell me what to do, right? And so I would say over the last 18 months, we had the New Jersey School Boards Association, which is the major nonprofit that every Board of Ed has to be a part of here in New Jersey. And they drive a ton of legislation and rules making, stuff like that. They came out and said that every school should offer esports. They came out and said that every school, should treat it like a varsity activity. There's no reason not to. And that Garden State Esports is the governing body. We had Rutgers come out and say it, which is a state institution, which has a lot of weight when it comes to like teaching. So for instance, when I put on a varsity coaching workshop, it's now through Rutgers because the hours spent, there, those teachers can bring it back and they get credit at their school. And it can't be denied because it's from the state institution, right? So a lot of my certificates, we just launched last year a referee and tournament organizing certificate. Basically, how to ref matches and run tournaments and stuff like that. And so all of those, have to be counted as official because it's through Rutgers. And that also, because Rutgers is a state institution, allows me, I could go into any community college. And, we have strong esports programs in our 4 years, but our community colleges are even better. And a lot of times I think the community colleges are the ones that benefit the most from esports, at least in New Jersey, because when you talk about getting kids in the building, keeping them around, you look at like a Camden County community, you look at a Brookdale Community College here in New Jersey, both of them are national champs in different titles across ECAC and NACE and NECC. So number one, where else are they going to win a national championship, right? They're not, joining the Big Ten anytime soon. But number two, generally they're commuter schools. And so these kids may have a 9 or 10 o'clock class, but then they're also going to stick around for like an 11 o'clock practice or, 2 o'clock practice. And now they're, again, building friendships and stuff like that. So we have a real strong college league here that we run. We've had, the major institutions, our Department of Education teamed up with us, and they offered a $250,000 scholarship for schools to bring esports and career education into their school. So we worked with them on that. But I mean, overall, it's really strong. So we got a ton of kids playing. We have a ton of buy-in. We have, I think, almost 270 high schools. Close to 200 of them are now offering varsity letters. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And I'd say the most recent thing that we're really proud of is we just hosted the first National College Combine, where we handpicked the kids, and just like a real combine, we had the best kids come and only the best kids, and had them compete and show off in front of, we had 50 colleges come, half were in-state, half are out-of-state. And as of, we put out a video a couple days ago, we had over 190 scholarship offers, for these 65 kids who came. And so we're really excited about that, because it also put the argument, to bed that there's no future in this. So not only can you play at the college level, right, you can also get a little bit of money. So we wound up doing 3 full rides for kids out of the combine. And then the average esports scholarship offered was roughly $12,000. So when you add that to the merit that, these kids all had great GPAs and stuff like that, they were taking off a decent chunk, of their college bill. And there's nothing better than cheaper free college.
Not at all, especially in today's economic climate, right? Being able to go to college on very minimal loans is going to be huge for these students' futures.
Absolutely.
And that's probably not something they appreciate right now, but it is something they will in the
parents
not too terribly
it.
distant. The parents certainly do.
I get a lot of nice emails from parents. So I said, hey, listen, maybe you want to throw a donation to GSE, help offset some of the costs and make sure that we can provide other kids these opportunities.
I guess this is the other thing that maybe not a lot of folks are aware of. Certainly I wasn't before sitting down today, but you run both the high school stateside and the collegiate league.
Yep.
And the collegiate league, you mentioned, almost exclusively plays in person matches. Is that
not
correct?
Almost. It's 100% in person. We do not, in our league, we do not play any virtual matches.
So how does the overlap and intersection look like between those two, and what does hosting those two leagues allow you to do as the person who kind of is the overlap?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting, right? It's something we had thought about because, again, you go to these panels and they want to talk about the pipeline and the college connection and all this stuff. And, we leave a lot of these conferences going, okay, how are we going to, let's not talk about it. Let's be about it. How are we going to do it? So, when you hear about we need to get more girls into esports, well, we started our all-girls league, right? We had 4% participation among our all-girls binary persons and marginalized genders, and now we have 25% of the league, right? And we're going to keep going until we get 50% of the league. So a lot of it is just, okay, how do we do something about this? And so when we looked at the college scene, we saw a bunch of different things, right? Because you have to get buy-in, you have to get these stakeholders to understand what you're going for, and really it came down to a few things. Number one is the kids who played in Garden State Esports had a great time, and the reality is, and again we poll our kids, 80% of our kids did not want to leave the state to go to college. On top of, if you look it up, New Jersey is notorious for brain drain. If the kids do go to college, a majority of them are going to go to New York or Pennsylvania or down south, right? We lose a ton of kids for some reason here in New Jersey. So we started the wheel spinning. Okay, hey, we're going to talk to the state and we're going to say, hey, we're going to make a college league because we know that, number one, 80% of our kids don't want to leave the state and they love esports. But number two, half of those kids report that they want to major in STEM when they get to a New Jersey college. And so these become the most valuable kids in the New Jersey economy. They want to major in cybersecurity. They want to major, in engineering and stuff like that, biomed. So to let these kids leave was a mistake, right? So that was the argument for, state level when I, have to talk to folks at the state. the other thing we were hearing from our kids, again, they had a great time when they were going to college, and the leagues that they were playing in, at least when we started 3-4 years ago, wasn't cutting it. Our kids are very used to having practices and being where they need to be. And, our forfeit rate is 2%, right? And any school forfeits in my league, they get a phone call from me, and I go in and we do a deep dive about why there was a forfeit and why it never needs to happen again, right? Because forfeits are the number one thing that kill esports. So these kids were going and they were playing in some of these leagues, and you had a 50% chance of your team showing up. But here's the reality about why, forfeits are absolutely devastating. How can you ever plan an event at a college and invite people to come watch a match and have like this big thing around an event when you don't even know if your opponent's going to show up?
Right.
On top of, we have some very nice spaces here in Jersey, esports spaces. And they're all stages with 5 computers and 5 computers, 6 computers right on the stage. How ridiculous is it that you have half a stage because you're playing virtually against another school that you never heard of in a weird time zone? So you invested millions of dollars in a space that you only get to use, 50%? On top of, you're always trying to find some kids who can run production for you, and you got to go find some casters. How can you have a meaningful program, when you're playing people you never heard of? The coaches are, non-responsive to DMs about playing, last-minute cancellations. You're probably talking to a kid on the team. You have no idea if that's even who it is. Everybody accuses everybody of smurfing and all this other nonsense, right? So we basically said, this will be a 100% in-person league. And so those high school kids now, because we're running it, are getting the same experience, right? Our colleges, we have a super low forfeit rate. And if they forfeit, they get in big trouble. So we've played all but one match this year. We had one team pulled out because they, couldn't come or whatever. But they very quickly rectified that, and they were at the next event and stuff. And so part of it too is, the kids are now having a better competitive experience. They can play with us basically from 3rd grade through post-grad, which is forever. And then, my team makes fun of me because I don't necessarily care about the college competition, right? We have a great college commissioner, John DeMarco. He comes from the fighting game community. He was a TO in China when he went to college there. And, the dude is a master. He understands the college scene. He understands the competitive level. Like I said earlier, Smash is huge in New Jersey. So we have a very strong Smash showing in our college league. He does a great job running all those competitions, and they're really high level. We got Pharaoh, we got people, highly ranked that play in our college league and stuff like that. However, the other thing that I cared about is if I have 270 high schools, when we have in-person matches, I now arrange field trips, and the high schools now go to the campus. So now you got 2 teams on the stage, and you have an audience. And we also have a really strong careers program, so we also are able to provide casters and production to the colleges that don't have them. So now we're hitting every element, and our colleges say, okay, this is going to be a really cool event. Let me invite administrators. Let me invite our own, college population. And now you have a full arena of people cheering for 2 colleges they've heard of. And now that we go into year 4, some of these rivalries are absurd. If you look at Brookdale and Rutgers, New Brunswick Smash teams, they're at each other's throat every match. I couldn't tell you how good they are. I know nothing about Smash, but I know like our kids who are watching and the players on the stage, like it's just screaming. It's like barn burner after barn burner. And so for me, like, what I love about like a Brookdale or like a Camden County or, Victor over at Seton Hall, they're smart enough to have the mascots come. They're smart enough to have administrators come and say, look what you built. Look why your space is, here's your ROI is you have 2 high schools here watching. You have kids on campus who are coming, maybe they're part of the gaming community, not the esports team, but they're also coming to watch. You got kids from the production and broadcasting majors here working the event. So now they actually have a real show to produce. And now you just show, and so that was the whole point of the college league is like, how can we need events. We need lands. Like that's what people care about. Who cares if you win a national championship in your home, in your room by yourself, not even with your team, right? Or you're on half a stage and nobody's watching, So for me, it was all about How can we get that sense of belonging? How can we get that razzle dazzle? How can we get a crowd? I mean, listen, nothing's better than, playing in front of a crowd. It really is something special about it. So that was the whole purpose, is let's get these kids to stay in college. Let's give them a great college competitive experience. And look, all of my colleges also playing NACE and NECC and ACAC and stuff like that. And I think that's fantastic. I don't want to be the only option. I tell them I don't even care if I'm your A option. Go send your best players to those leagues. Give me your B team. Give me your JV kids. We don't care. Like, we just want to have something to come watch and have a great time and cheer for. And, and it's been going really, really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome.
One of the things you kind of touch on there that I'm interested in is you're talking a lot too about talking to the state, talking to the government, talking to the athletic association, trying to make all of those connections and advocate for a world that doesn't have a lot of outside advocacy. Where do you even start to try to have those kinds of conversations for someone who might be interested in pushing the envelope through those levers and mechanisms?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's a couple different things, right? You got to remember, this is after 7 years.
Right.
And part of what you don't see, or I don't always share so often in the first couple years, listen, I'm not the smartest guy. I don't have all the answers, but I will not be outworked. There was nobody that will work harder than me. And a lot of that hard work looked like I sent email updates every 6 months to the NJSIA. They didn't answer me for 4 years. I sent politicians emails. I invited them to events, right? Nobody answered me. Nobody showed up. Nobody would talk to me. But eventually I would win somebody over, right? So somebody like a Dave Bruno from Camden County, who's the dean of students over there. When he came in, he saw the event. He goes, this is amazing. So then he made a phone call on my behalf. And then I got into this meeting because, but ultimately it's one of those things where you just have to be relentless. And that's what I try to be, is absolutely relentless. And I feel fine being super annoying and emailing and calling and basically harassing these people. Because at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is what's best for kids, right? And as a teacher, which I'm always going to be, it's not a job, it's a state of mind, it's a state of being. I'm always going to do what's best for kids. So fighting for varsity letters, fighting for, I'm now fighting with our local media here, right? Because they refuse to cover esports. Well, we have this great thing going on. Why aren't we getting the same coverage as any other high school activity? And so now I'm going to fight that fight, and I'll email everybody in that company, and I will call them, and I will harass them until I eventually win. And that's really a big part of it, is we're doing something that matters. And, a big part of life is how long can you do something with people ignoring you and not paying attention to you? Can you keep running, the sprint when nobody's patting you on the back? And so there were years and years and years where not a single person answered me. Fast forward 7 years, now basically everybody answers me. And it's not because of me, it's because of what we built, right? And so I think the other thing is people are so often asking, not just in esports, but I think everywhere, they're so often saying, oh, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? Instead of saying, come see what I've done. Come see what I've made. Come see what I've built. Because I can explain esports to people, especially, the politicians and stuff like that. I have politicians whose kids play in our league, but the politician themselves just doesn't understand what we're talking about. Right? So I have never had somebody who's come to one of our events, especially our championship has 3,000 people at them. They're insane. Yeah. I've never had somebody walk in and see these kids raising the belt and crying because they won and, being talked up by their coach because they lost and all the stuff that makes sports great and all that social emotional stuff that we love. Kids are casting. Everything I do can run. So my kids cast, my kids run production. Nobody's ever walked in and go, oh, this is stupid. Why would we ever want to support this? This is dumb. They walk in and say, I love that. I have no idea what I'm looking at, but I see a bunch of happy kids. And that's probably even like the most common email I get from parents is I don't totally understand what they're doing. I just know my kid is now coming home happy. Yeah. And I will make the phone calls. I will make the emails. I will ask for things that I probably shouldn't be asking for yet. You know what I mean? Varsity letters, state appropriations, whatever it is, because I know what we're doing matters. And, now more than ever, leaning into the stuff that matters is really important. And at the end of the day, when I'm dead, I'm still going to look back and say, hey, I did something that matters, right? This league will outlast me. Like I said, this year it looks like we're going to do between 3 and 6 full rides. That's 3 to 6 families that we have impacted unbelievably. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that, to me, it's worth, politicians asking me to please stop emailing them. It's worth being hung up on. My other argument now is with all of the endemic and non-endemic Jersey-based brands. Jersey Mike's, Wawa, Ocean Spray, Mars, right? All of these big, Wells Fargo, all of these big companies that are in New Jersey, and they all have this charitable section on their website that says, we want to support, our state and the people in our state. Well, cool, here's your chance. I got 14,000 kids. I'm in every county. I'm in 3/4 of the colleges. I'll be in 100% of the colleges in the next year. How are you not supporting this, Campbell's Soup? Explain it to me. What more could you be looking for? And I'm fully confident in saying that because I know what we have built is special. And I think that's what more people need to do is build something and not worry about, what people say while you're building it. And then you just come say, look at what I did. Because everybody wants to attach themselves to a finished product. That's a big thing. People want to attach themselves to a finished product. They don't want to do the work. But they're happy to take credit and be attached to a finished product. And that's fine. I've had politicians come out and be like, this is in my district. Look at this great event that we support. Bro, I talked to you twice. But that's fine. Take credit. I don't care. So I think that's the word part of it. Right. I don't care. I'm fine being humble and, we have a lot of great people who help us, but then we also have some people who just want to, again, hang their hat on a finished product and say, look at this thing I helped do. And even if that helping was showing up and taking a picture, fine. That is 100% fine because it's not for me, right? It's for the kids.
But in a lot of ways, it sounds like when you're first starting those conversations, it's not about the number of no's you get. It's about the one yes you eventually get.
Right.
Which I think that the aptitude for failure is not something that most folks often experience, right? Right. But not being afraid of that is critical in our world.
Yeah, people see failure as a permanent state. If you saw all the things that we have failed at, all the things that we tried, if I showed you every email that I've sent unanswered for years, if I took that as a failure, as a permanent state of being, instead of just saying this is temporary, we wouldn't be where we were.
Right.
And so it's one of those things too, whether it goes back to being a wrestler. I imagine I got this little person on my shoulder, said, you got to prove him wrong. You got to prove him wrong. You got to prove him wrong. Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. And a lot of that is fueled by the stories from the coaches, from the kids, from their parents, from the colleges. When you know that you're making an impact, it's fantastic. And you don't know if you're making an impact until you finally, you have the thing. That's why you just build it, man. Our joke is we build the plane while it's flying. We have no idea what we're doing, but we know why we're doing it matters. So we're just going to build it and we'll be fine.
Many grassroots organizations find themselves just like Chris described to Garden State Esports, building the plane while they're flying it. Here at College Esports News, we are no different. We know what we're doing matters, and we couldn't do it without our fantastic staff and community. If you want to support a grassroots organization, consider joining College Esports News as a volunteer. You can gain real-world experience working on really cool content. For example, you can star in our videos as on-camera talent or put together the final edited video that'll go live on our social media pages. With CEN, you can showcase your work, collaborate with a skilled team, and gain hands-on experience, all with a flexible time commitment. If this sounds interesting to you, or you want to share this opportunity with students or someone else you know, head on down to the link in the description below to learn more. Now, back to my conversation with Chris. I suppose that's the other thing that I'm curious about. You've mentioned a lot of times, or this has been a 7-year project.
Right.
What has the evolution of the high school product, let's say specifically, looked like over those 7 years? Have you noticed the skill level of the students increasing? Have you noticed the general, obviously there's been more built up around the league, more schools are getting onboarded, right? But with that, what other kinds of challenges or opportunities have there been along the way with a maturing ecosystem?
I think a maturing ecosystem, number one, we are hearing now from colleges who are interested in recruiting that our kids are some of the best, not because they're always the top talented, right? But our kids really do two things very well. Number one is they show up to practice, which you can imagine if you're trying to build a program, right? Our kids know that they have to show up, right? Our high school varsity programs are generally practicing now 5 days a week. When the league first started, it was 3 days a week. Now it's up to 5 days a week.
Yep.
So they know to show up to practice. They take that very seriously. And, we have always leaned into that traditional sports model of, don't tell me you have a dentist. Don't tell me you have to work. Don't tell me you don't feel good. If you're alive, you need to be ready to play. And if you're not ready to play, it's the next man up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so we always
right.
We always make sure that we have backups and stuff like that. And when we, do our coaching workshops, we explain to them, if a kid does not show up, he needs to be replaced. It doesn't matter if they're best, right? Or the evolution of our tryout recommendations. We used to think that, okay, maybe we want to take the best kids, but we've evolved over time now where our rubric is completely social and emotional, right? How do they act when they're winning? How do they act when they're losing? How's their comms? How's their leadership? How's their communication skills? And we tend to see above average players, right, talent-wise, with exceptional skills, are the ones that wind up anchoring their team, right? And so, because we're data nerds, man, we keep track of everything. What happens is you can make the Garden State Esports playoffs being carried by 1 or 2 kids, but you will not win a state championship. You will get crushed by 3, 4, 5 kids who are above average, but work very well, right? We have a school in New Jersey called Barnegat High School, one of the best programs in the state. They've won Overwatch state championships the last 3 years. They've won Rocket League. They win all kinds of stuff. And these are kids that are champ, high diamond, but their communication skills, the way that they work together, their game planning, right? They watch film and they dominate teams that, may be all immortals, but they play as 5 individuals versus as playing as one team, right? And I think that's something beautiful because it does speak to the ability to coach these kids up and why coaching matters. And so, again, the maturity is our coaches are getting better. I would say the floor of our talent is getting better, right? We're not seeing, obviously, a ton of top-level 1%ers. We do have them, right? But we're seeing less bronze and silvers, and we're seeing more golds, more diamonds and stuff like that, right? So I like to think that has to do a lot with playing together and the coaching and stuff like that. But the other thing our kids do really well from the evolution is they don't shit the bed when they play in person, right? To make it to a Garden State Esports playoff, right? One of the things that we're really proud of is we take 50% of the teams, just like traditional sports, but we play the entire playoff in person in one day. And so these kids get the experience of playing in front of thousands of people. And when it, gets to, we sent Rock Boom to St. Clair's, and I talked to, the coaches over there, and they say, hey, when they, I think it was a couple of years ago, when they played at Riot in the national championship, he wasn't rattled. It was only a couple hundred people. He's playing in front of thousands before. Oh. So I think that our kids, I don't know if they've gotten necessarily better, right? I think the floor has been raised, and I think that they're a little bit more battle tested. Right? Because every kid that was in the combine, those 65 kids, they either won a state championship or they made it to the stage for the finals. And, when I was watching them, and one of the things I let them know that we were going to do at the combine is I said, hey, we're going to let coaches on the stage for all second matches to look over your shoulder and listen to you. And I had not a single kid get worried or nervous or freak out. They said, cool, let's do it. Because their coaches over their shoulder, they always have crowds and stuff like that. And so, we had 30 coaches on the stage staring over top of these kids. And if they're playing for a scholarship, these kids, unshakable, right? And I think that really matters. So I think that's really important. I think completely on the opposite side of the world that matters to me is our we call it the team behind the team, our production kids, our casters, the work that we're doing, in that sense, because we really see ourselves as a workforce development program for the Arts, Entertainment, and Design CTE cluster. those kids got higher scholarship offers than the players at the combine, right? They got offered, every one of them got offered a scholarship, and the scholarships they got offered were bigger than the esports scholarships that the players got.
Yeah.
So I think if you come to our events, our production, our casting, we have a great, head director of casting, Bo Prochoid Lamano, is a former pro caster, and he made the mistake of reaching out on Twitter and saying, "Hey, do you need any casting support?" And 5 years later, he's built this unbelievable casting pipeline where our kids are getting, scholarship offers to come cast.
Yeah.
And so, we try to be a full, kind of like a full suite. We're not just competition, but we're careers. We also do a ton, around the social emotional stuff and the health and wellness. We have health and wellness curriculum. When I was coaching every Monday, my kids never touched a controller. We went and lifted weights, right? We talked about what that looks like and how diet, sleep, and exercise is going to impact your performance, whether it's on a test or in a video game or in a sport. So, I think with maturity has become, just a lot of, the seeds that we planted have taken root. And so the culture, the community that we've built, right? 89% of our kids no longer play with strangers online. They play with friends they've made in the league, or they played with friends from their school esports program. So, 99% of these kids say that they've made at least one new friend that's joining the esports program. So it's one of those things now where I don't have to explain what esports is. I don't have to explain who we are. I don't have to explain why we're doing what we're doing. I often have to explain how do I do what we're doing here? What does it look like at my school? What does it look like at my college? Help me build a vision. But the vision that we're building looks the same everywhere. We want to do what's right by kids. We want to make kids better people and better players. We want them to have, that sense of belonging. We want them to have high standards, right? So my coaches, again, they'll say, don't tell me you have a dentist appointment. Don't tell me that you have to work. You better request off on game days and practices and stuff. So we're just really proud of the culture. And really it's, you have a whole state rowing in the same direction. And that's what I wish for the whole movement, is everybody kind of just to row in the same direction.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think one of the things, again, as you keep talking, the thing that's in the back of my head, especially for an expanding program, is all of the things you're saying, from the events. If a league night looks like two teams that are 30 minutes apart, a 30-minute drive from each other, meeting up in person and playing, and then the high schools of the area coming out to visit, that is an event that takes a lot of hours to set up by somebody. Like, somebody has to do the work of being able to coordinate the travel and making sure the logistics are all set and making sure the students have transportation to get there and back and all of those sorts of things. And the more initiatives you bring out, the Combine is another great example, right? That takes so much effort to collaborate with the high schoolers themselves and the coaches and bringing the event together and logistics of all of that and the venue and all of those things. That sounds like it takes a lot of man hours to put in and get the work done. How do you go about building programs that are new or just getting involved into this ecosystem when they don't have the budget to have as much staff support than they might think they need?
It's one of those things, right, where when I started Garden State Esports, the first couple of years, I paid for everything out of my pocket, much to my wife's dismay. And I told her, I said, we're building something special, right? It'll come back. It's just money. It's going to come back. And, I didn't charge the colleges to attend the Combine because I know they don't have the budget. I don't charge the colleges to be part of the league because I know they don't have the budget. So when you talk barrier of entry, you're talking money, right? That's really what everyone's talking about. Because if I ask you a whole bunch of stuff, then I need to make sure you get a whole bunch of money, right? When you talk about burnout and putting the hours in, listen, nobody minds working 40 hours if the money's good.
Yeah.
Why I'm trying to get state appropriations is I want to get everybody in the ecosystem more money because everybody is working hard. But what I am working on now is kind of just saying, look, we have to build it for that to happen. We have to have these things. And, I would say on the scholastic side, it's a lot easier because at the end of the day, teachers didn't become teachers for money. And I never asked them to do more than I'm willing to do. And what that means is a lot of the logistics and the planning, I handle all that. I handle the scheduling, I book the events, right? I even coordinate with some of the colleges to make sure the kids have transportation. But I also turn around and say, listen, and it's getting a little bit harder because I didn't realize how many colleges require school transportation for events and stuff like that. But listen, you got a car, go home, right? Then drive out, whatever you have to do. Because unless we start to build this, there is no world where I can, get the money that we want. So there's even, I'm brainstorming with the colleges is how do we get the ROI back to them, right? And so whether it's proposing all kinds of crazy stuff. Well, if a kid comes out for the esports program on a scholarship or something, like, can they get more money for the actual program? Or talking to these directors or talking to admissions, what is it going to take for you, admissions officer, to take esports seriously? How many kids? Because they don't even track the kids, right? I know for a fact that we send a bunch of kids to these colleges, right? But there's no Garden State esports tag or esports tag on intake that says, oh, they're coming, from GSE because they met the team and they had the experience and they want to go and be involved and stuff like that. So it's there's a frustration there where the colleges want an ROI, but the colleges aren't doing often what they need to do to help me prove there's an ROI. Because my argument, right, I see the smile. My argument is, how many kids do I need to send to you for you to take this seriously? Because I would make the argument, right, that I'm probably sending more kids for, your esports, your esports experience than maybe you're getting other outside programs sending you, right? So, obviously kids who play soccer in high schools are going to go play soccer at college, but there's no body that is specifically saying, hey, soccer players, stay in New Jersey. Here's the colleges in New Jersey that you can play soccer at, and let me set up a field trip for you, right? Their coaches are doing that, but we're actively, we're almost like what do they call them in the political world? We're almost like a lobbyist for the Jersey colleges, saying, hey, stay in Jersey, play esports, you're going to have a great time. Listen, if the colleges would help me prove that we're getting them, 10 more kids a year than they would, or 10 kids would leave the state, but now they're coming to your college. So, part of that too is I'm trying to help folks. Everyone wants the ROI, but, you have to help prove the ROI. So, that's a big part of it, right? It is a lot of work, but we're very careful about what we ask for. What we ask for, for the combine, for instance, all we ask for people is to show up. Nobody had to do a single thing except show up. We planned the day, we got the food, we fed everybody, we didn't charge anybody. A lot of the schools wound up paying for the kids to come because we were worried that the kids wouldn't show up. So we asked the schools to pay a $50 hold fee. And they wound up doing that, which I was very surprised that they did. I didn't think they would, but they do it for other sports. So it's great that they did it for this.
Yeah.
But, that's a big part of it, right? We try to do, and my team, where I got 26 people on my team, everybody's still a full-time teacher, basically, but me. Yeah. So even with my own team, I make sure I don't ask them to do too much. So we do the scheduling, and I try to do everything I can to take all of the, especially the boring stuff, like I said, off their plate so they get to do the cool stuff, like plan these great events. And then it's really just, okay. Often, a lot of it's just showing up, right? I ask people for their time, and so they have a schedule, they have the place to be, they have when they need to be there. We have the TOs, we, take care of 90% of it. And then we just, ask them to show up, and when they're showing up, have a good time. And we just ask them to if you're going to play in the league, you got to show up, have extra kids, stuff like that. So, at the end of the day is I think I suffer from what every program, college program, scholastic, state league, whatever, more money is what we all need.
Right.
And so part of the fight is getting the people with the purse strings to pay attention, right? So getting my state to see, that we're keeping kids in New Jersey for college, but I can't do that yet because the colleges won't track the kids that we're sending. So we do informal, you know what I mean? Like we have a Google form that we push out to our seniors and alumni and stuff like that. Are you staying in state? Where are you going? Was esports, part of that decision making? I think 80% of our kids, 81, said a college's esports or gaming community was part of my decision making process in deciding to go to college. So if I have that stat and then I show that, look, you have 10 kids from across the state who played in the league, a college ain't going to throw their esports program at the college a couple $1,000s. That's insane to me. But I guess that's the case, is we're not there yet.
Right. Sometimes dozens of students don't speak volumes to much of anything when you talk about, higher education, even though we see the impact that we're making in those students' lives, right? The numbers game doesn't pan out to someone from an outsider's perspective, and I think that's something
Let me ask you though, have you found that the numbers game doesn't pan out, but my frustration is they won't even give me a number. They won't even say, here's what we need to see for a meaningful investment. And that's what drives me nuts, because I'm sitting here going, tell me what you want. You want an ROI, you want something, you want to make this, what is it? How many kids? I'll get you that many kids. What do you need? How many events? What do you need? And they don't know.
They don't know because there's no blueprint.
Exactly.
Like, we're building the blueprint as we go along with this. We don't really know what a successful esports program is supposed to look like, other than, okay, we think we're supposed to retain students. Okay, we're supposed to have this percent. We're supposed to have this percentage of campus that we can reach, right? We're supposed to have, these are the students that can be more hyperly competitive and actively involved, but there's no corollary really, because you're in this weird middle ground between being a formal athletic program and a club program, and you're playing against an actual club. And on the college side, right? I mean, we're all over the place, and the blueprint is still being developed. That's one of the reasons why we're having these conversations and why we're putting in the effort to figure out what's going on across the country, because nobody has the full completed picture. Nobody has the metric that says this is what the standard esports program looks like across the country. This is what we know with the right resources every program can do. Because you're right, we don't have the tracking. Most programs don't have the tracking to be able to do that in the first place, or the priorities. I realize my role as a esports coordinator, director, ish position is torn so often between how much time do I spend setting up for the future versus how much time do I spend talking to the students that I have on my campus right now and making their experience impactful. I'm the one person in the bottleneck that's got to balance both sides, right? And I don't have the hours to do both.
Sure.
Right? Something has to take the hit. Sometimes it's the data side. I haven't looked at data for the past 2 or 3 months in our esports lounge usage because I haven't gotten around to it, because I've been busy hosting events for the students come onto campus, or hosting things for high schools to come in and be involved and be engaged in what we have going on here, and starting to open up our doors in that way, just within the first few years of being here. There's only 40 hours in a week that I'm supposed to have. Ends up being 45 or 50. Don't tell anybody. But that's the way this goes. And I don't think any of us really have a full idea. And that's why conversations like this are so critical and important. Since our launch in 2022, College Esports News has been primarily volunteer run. We've been able to create over 300 pieces of content across graphics, videos, and written articles for viewers like you to enjoy. We are still fundraising for the 2025-2026 academic year, and every dollar, share, and kind word makes a world of a difference. You can go to paypal.me/collegeenews to tip now. Thank you so much for your consideration and support. Now, back to my conversation with Chris. One more quick thing for you, Chris, before we ask our final question. So, penultimate one here for you. What are the 3 things that you think college programs can do that will most benefit the high school ecosystem, regardless of where they are? Is it more visibility around what their program is and advertising to high schoolers? Is it trying to host more events or provide more workshops or boot camps? What are those priorities that you believe
Right.
college programs should really focus on to best benefit the high school and scholastic space?
Number one, I know being in Wisconsin, you have a fantastic state league, right? Every state should have a state league, right? Part of where I think we may be missing something in that high school to college, or I guess even at the high school level, is successful esports looks very similar to traditional sports, right? Maybe not necessarily run by the athletic association, but there should be, right, some type of nonprofit run by educators who are overseeing and otherwise organizing, right? And I can tell you here in Jersey and most other states, there's a state athletic association. What most state athletic associations do is they pay for the playoffs, basically, right? The coaches association for each sport is the association that manages the day-to-day, does the scheduling, does the minor events and stuff like that. And the idea that we don't have some type of formal system in every state where the educators are the ones who are speaking out and looking after the kids and being the stewards of the competition and stuff like that, to me is crazy, right? So number one, the colleges either getting involved with their state association or otherwise working, finding, supporting, growing, even leading, right? So I know like in New Hampshire, that state scholastic league is being put together by the colleges, which I think is fantastic. And the colleges are getting together, and it's not about getting more kids to go to my college. It's about getting kids to play in high school esports. And, I think that is really important, right? This has to look like traditional sports. It doesn't have to be traditional sports. There's a lot of ways that esports is different, and we can be different. I think it's great that we're different. But, creating an ecosystem that looks like every other after-school program and is managed like every other after-school program is a big thing. And, a lot of times there's a lot of high school, and even middle school, college, high school coaches and high school educators that would love to find support at the college level because they know maybe there's a league like this, or they're not happy with the current situation, or even some states, they just have nowhere to play. To have colleges come out and say, hey, like, we're a network of colleges. We just want to help you do this X, Y, and Z. Because listen, I'll tell you, maybe one of the biggest secrets of all, we have 14,000 kids in the league. We schedule thousands of matches a year. Scheduling matches is not that hard, right? Running, it's glorified spreadsheets. Running a league where who's playing who, it ain't that hard. So the idea that running a state league is hard, from a logistics standpoint, to me is a bit of a myth. Because again, go back and look at the traditional sports model, right? I'm in New Jersey. We could be anywhere in 90 minutes. I get it. Like, we're smaller. But you look at some of these bigger states, right? Go look at a Texas, look at a, Louisiana, look at a California. California and CIF, they, are right now having the wrestling state championships, 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A. Why they can't manage an esports league in the exact same way? They found a way to get all these schools involved in other traditional sports, right? Every school has a place to play. You're starting to see, like CIF do some really nice things with esports. That needs to be expanded, right? Look at Texas, right? Regionalize it. You play the regions, then you go to the states and stuff like that. So, number one, that infrastructure needs to be in every state. And I think colleges have a role, because you can't necessarily be a messiah in your own land. And these teachers who are screaming that, hey, like, we want to start a league, we want to be competitive, we want to be hyper local, we want to play schools we've heard of, their own administrators, or in some sad, situations, their athletic associations, or they're not listening to the teachers. But now you bring in the colleges, and the colleges are saying, hey, like, we want to support a league. I think that's really important, right? I think that until we get like this hyper local kind of, I definitely see a role for college in governance and helping within their state. I think that's really important. So I think that's one big one.
In some ways, me saying, I don't have the hours in the day. Well, the teachers have even less hours in the day than I do, right, to worry about esports stuff. And so getting involved there is critical. All right. Two more.
All right. So,
I mean, is it to power of suggestion? I know,
sure.
right? But are there initiatives we should do to target specific students and host our own combines or boot camps or things? Are there initiatives we should be looking at, whether it's partnerships with our state league or otherwise to host high schools to come in and compete in our space, whether it be in a standalone tournament or for their competitive match or what have you?
Mhm.
Uh, what are the other things that we can provide in that way that
So,
maybe are integrated, ideally, right, are integrated into what I already do?
right. So what I would say is, I'm trying to think how to phrase it, right? So we've had an issue for a little while here with how colleges interact with the scholastic space. I would tell you, maybe 3/4 of the colleges are doing it the right way. And again, I would argue the right way is like that traditional sports model where you reach out to the coach. The idea that colleges are reaching out directly to kids still bothers me, right? Because I have issues here in New Jersey where we've had colleges promising kids they're going to be a starter, inviting them to a college Discord, and the kid's not even 18. We've had eighth graders invited to college discords and is having conversations with coaches and in the college discord playing friendlies with the college. Some of these really good middle school and high schoolers are playing friendlies with the college team and stuff like that, and they're not even 18. Their parents don't know about it. Their high school coach doesn't know about it. It's just because they reached out to these kids. Or listen, let's be honest, we also on the scholastic side need to educate our kids, because a lot of times it's the kids reaching out to the esports director.
Yeah.
That's not okay. 100% not okay. So what I would tell you is absolutely have a relationship with your state league. I think your state leagues more than anything need support because, again, you need that consensus. If they have 10, 20, 30, 40 colleges in the state saying, hey, Wasia or whoever, like this is a league that matters. People should pay attention. You should play here. You should, do X, Y, and Z. It's a great way to take some of your players who maybe do have some more free time, right? Getting them, to help out, BTOs, to help them do something, right? So, if they have less time, you don't have a lot of time, right? Maybe, especially it always looks really nice when it's something like in their major, right? If they're in broadcasting or production, or they're in event planning, or they're in computer science, right? I think all that stuff really, really matters. And so I think what you're saying is more points of contact is always more better, but also it needs to be done the right way. And the right way for me, and what we did for the combine, is you have to CC the parents, you have to CC the coach. But, I'm sure you've seen it, but what maybe has gotten lost for some people is when kids sign up for something, generally they're using their school email, and their school email always, anything emailed to them gets blocked, right? So we don't necessarily want to ask a kid for their outside email. Parents are obviously different level of involvement. The one constant is going to be that esports coach, right? That high school coach. And so one thing your state league can do is make readily available the list of contacts in the state of the high schooler. And that to me is information to be shared, right? Hey, college, here's all the programs that we have, and here's the contact for the whatever. If you want to host anything, you want to invite anything, right? That, I think that's the proper way to do it. There's a proper channel, and that just legitimizes the whole process. I think the other side of it, though, is, if we do invite them, we have to understand what they're looking for, right? And again, if you're going to invite them to a competition, you also want to show them the production side. You want them to meet the casters, play, inviting them to play. Like if you're in Wasia and you have them come and play on the stage, like a matchup that was going to be virtual is played in person because they're close enough. That's fantastic. But I feel like a lot of times the colleges, they have great intentions, but they don't realize at a minimum, schools need at a minimum 2 months to get to your school, because they have to go to Board of Ed approval. They got to arrange transportation, and so it's one of the things that we're working on with our colleges, and even as a league, is we basically are running one event a month outside of our 3 major championships now. We are trying to get them almost like in the books, we'll call it, right? So like the ACC Smash tournament, which we had this Saturday, is always going to be in March. It's always going to be the first weekend of March. And now you can put in a full year because you know that that event's always going to happen, right? So education is like the slowest thing on the planet. And I feel like a lot of times college directors are inviting schools out with like 3 weeks notice, 4 weeks notice, when it should be at a minimum 2 months, ideally 3 months or a full year, right? So if you're going to have an event, make sure, and again, this goes to running that race without encouragement. Like you're going to run this event and the first year, nobody's going to show up, right? Same thing with the combine. I invited over 400 colleges to the combine, right? I only had about 50 or so show up. But I got another 100 emails that said, hey, this is a great idea. Do it again next year, and we're going to plan a budget for it. So we already announced that next February, we're running the combine. So I'm hoping that it goes from 50 to 150, right? I did 200 college directors ignore me? 100%, right? But maybe after the next year when 150 colleges show up, now those 200 people that ignored me, now they want to get involved, right? So it's one of those things. So do host events, do have points of contact, but make it a goal to say, hey, we're going to do one a semester. And it's always going to be in this month. And maybe that's a month where, you have an off league or something like that. And make it engaging, right? Have it your college kids play the high school kids on the stage. Because now all of a sudden, like that's way more engaging than just watching half your stage be full. And listen, you got to cross your fingers that the other college team shows up, so they can watch something. So I think that's a big thing too. Third one may sound silly, but I would love for somebody to do this, and I think it's going to be a college that does it. Somebody has to release free open source tournament software. Has to. Because we, again, if it's glorified spreadsheets, and we built our own at Garden State Esports, so we have our own software, that's part of the problem, man, is they need the tool. And all these, whether they're companies or even the free tools, they all come with issues, right? So the software we built doesn't require or even have a way for students to log in or anything like that, right? So it's FERPA and COPPA compliant, all that good stuff. But I just feel like when I talk to other educators in other states and they're like, okay, we want to do this, what they're missing is some type of software. And you have amazing leagues like Iowa who are really running a state league on Google Sheets, and it can be done. It makes me nervous because all these formulas, and they break or something like that. But to my knowledge, there is no open source tournament software that can, run a statewide league or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because it needs to be hyper local. It needs to be managed by teachers. It's not necessarily, maybe colleges within the state can get it done, but even then, the best people who are going to be running these competitions are going to understand that in New Jersey, hey, we got the Shore Conference, we got Big North Conference, we got the Interscholastic Conference down south, we got the Cape Atlantic, right? So I know what the conferences are. I know who's playing each other. I know who the general rivals are, and I make sure the rival is on the schedule of the school when we're making it. So, but I think software is an issue, and I think that's a lot of like where we're getting tied down and bogged down and tied up is like, we're either beholden to somebody to use their software, or we're using, some free software, but the kid has to sign up, the kid has to attach their accounts, and, any high school or middle school teacher that's doing their due diligence, no board of ed is going to okay, this software for all these kids to sign up, so we only have coaches. So I don't need to go to the board of ed. The coaches are the only ones that sign up for our platform, and they put in, and you know what? We all just trust each other that they're putting in the correct information. And really it's just like the name of the player, right? Their first name. And in the case of like Smash, like what characters they're playing. So, I mean, I think until we're free from the shackles of some of these, glorified spreadsheet companies and stuff like that, it's going to be really hard to prop up an ecosystem. I even think about like maybe it doesn't even necessarily have to be, some free open source. I'm unaware of anybody that just has software, right? So go back to wrestling. Track wrestling is the software that we use in the state of New Jersey for all wrestling, and it keeps all the tournaments and it keeps all the matches and the scores and blah blah blah. And every school contributes a certain amount of money, and they get track wrestling. I actually might even be the State Athletic Association who manages that relationship with this for the software. But a lot of these software folks also want to control who's playing who, and they want to control the matchmaking, they want to control the rules, and that's not what they're here for, right? Let the states and let the kids and the coaches decide what they want to play, instead of dictating to them what and how and when they play. That's never going to work on a national level. It's never going to work on a free software sign-up website. So I think some good Samaritan, some good college, some computer science internship kid just needs to build a badass tournament platform and just give it away.
Sounds like a great senior capstone project, and I think
exactly.
You might have given us another topic for a whole other episode, Chris, here towards the very end. We ask one question of all of our guests as the last question. If you could snap your fingers to change one thing about the scholastic esports landscape, what would it be?
I wish we could reset, man. I really feel like in the early days of esports with the cash grabs and people selling esports as a turnkey solution, and esports is so hard, you can't do it, we have to do it for you. I think that did a lot of damage, and I think we're still undoing that damage. To me, I look around the space, and whether it's the college level or, we have the ISEA now at the high school level where all of our states are talking, we're all still like in damage control. We're all still trying to crawl out from the initial esports launch of, scholastic and collegiate esports. And it's really hard because nobody owns football and nobody owns soccer, but Blizzard and Riot, they own the games. And they very clearly couldn't care less about esports at the college level, let alone scholastic esports. And I have to wonder how much of that was because of what happened earlier, right? And so I don't know. I just feel like the pro esports scene has been so toxic and has been so poorly run. And I feel like the college, the college and the scholastic scene, we've been trying to crawl out from like the early esports days for a long time. I don't know if we ever will. I don't know if we'll ever see investment or, altruistic involvement from outside forces in esports. Even at the college level, NACE and NECC and ECAC working together, even if it's not for my league, it's for the college scene. I don't know, if it happens, if it's going to happen. The high school states, talk about it, but there's also no competition because we don't want each other's schools. So I am curious to see if doing the right thing will win out over being the biggest or the best or the people who make the most money. Because at the end of the day, that stuff where it's about the biggest and the best and making the most money, they're going to die. What is there, one national platform left at Scholastic? Right? The rest of them have been all bought up. So now there's one gatekeeper. That's insane. Absolutely insane. And just, I don't know. I don't know how we get out from under it. I don't know how we, I don't know. There's a seat for everybody at the table, but not everybody wants to take the seat. Some people are just pulling up chairs. And so we've been trying to crawl out from under that for a long time. And I don't know if we are out or ever get out. But that would, I wish we had a better start, because even on like a microcosm, there were a lot of schools, right, who started esports, right, middle school, high school, whatever. And especially back in, the beginning, the amount of social risk and social capital you had to spend to bring esports to your school, you got one shot. Whether it's because you decided to buy some gaming computers, or maybe you kept it cheap and you bought some consoles, or you paid some of the absurd subscription fees from the beginning of the world of esports, you got one shot. So when your forfeit rate was through the roof and the kids never got to play and people weren't happy and, you went, the Board of Education, you had a meeting, open session, and people are dragging you for buying $12,000 worth of computers, because you didn't have a plan for using those computers during the day to teach on, right? You just use them after school, which is an insane thing to think that's going to be okay. It's rough, man. And I wish we didn't have such a bad start, because those early adopters who had a bad experience, they're not going to get a second chance. So there's a lot of programs that died, because the start was so terrible. So, I mean, we're trying to undo a lot of that in Jersey, just like I'm sure everybody else is. But man, I just wish we had a better, I just wish esports came out of a better space.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep building towards it. That's for sure. Chris, any other closing thoughts before we end off?
No, that's it, man. If I could be of any service to anybody in the scholastic or collegiate space, I'm not hard to find. I'm always willing to share thoughts and debates and arguments. And, I have strong opinions. It doesn't mean they're always right, but I'm always happy to reconsider and learn and have conversations. And so, listen, always here to help.
All right. Well, Chris, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You just listened to Torchbearers by College Esports News. Thanks so much again to our guest, Chris Aviles, for joining us. As always, I was your host, Kenneth Crisino. Tom Screech collaborated as a writer on this episode. V. Tran is our editor. Sheridan Shea helped record this episode. And Derek Santiago is creative director of CEN. Be sure to follow CEN on X, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram to stay up to date on all things college esports. And check out our website at collegeesportsnews.org. If you liked this episode, please engage with it on social media. And if you want to support us even more, you can visit our merch store at akqire.ca/CEN. Give a tip at paypal.me/collegeenews, or go down to the description to take a look for the volunteer application for the organization. Thanks again for listening, and keep carrying the flame.